Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show.
I just wanted to express the beauty of my culture, like just the things that I love about it, and it's just silly, dumb things like Lucha Libre. You know what I mean? Like, it is a small hill to want to die on, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to sit there and take who has been presented to me, who I know to be, the pinnacle of what heroism can be, and to see Hollywood shit on that in various ways. If anything, that's what I've done in my career in comics, is just bet on myself, even when I was told, by people that it was a crazy idea or that it wouldn't work. And I just had enough faith that like there'd be enough audience to support it. And here I am. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Short Box Podcast.
The Short Box Podcast is recorded live from Jacksonville, Florida.
Yo, Shortbox Nation, how are we feeling today? Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 367. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the Shortbox Podcast, aka the best comic review and talk show in the multiverse. My name is Botter, and I'll be your host today. Hopefully the intro has piqued your interest, because today I've got a great conversation with a really good guest to share with all of you. The man that you heard in the intro is Jay Gonzo. He's a Chicano artist who resides in Phoenix, Arizona. Gonzo has spent the past 25 plus years using his creative skills at ad agencies, toy and comic companies, and creating his own comic book titled La Mano del Destino, which is a love letter to Lucha Libre and Silver Age comics. It was put out through Image Comics last year and published by his own imprint, Castle and Key Publications. I met Gonzo at Heroes Con in June after stopping by his booth. I picked up a copy of La Mano del Destino, this oversized, beautiful trade paperback, and after flipping through just the first 2 pages, 3, 4, 5 pages, I became an instant fan of the work, but also the man behind the pencil. After having a short chat with him, a really fun chat with him, I knew he'd be a perfect fit for the show. So once again, you are in for a great interview today. Before I bring Gonzo on, I think it's perfect timing to get some house cleaning items out the way, and more so address the new listeners joining us for the first time so they know how we do things here at the Short Box. For starters, we've got the video version of this podcast up on YouTube. We've been posting a lot more video content on our channel. The videos drop on Wednesdays, the same day the podcast drops. If you're a Patreon subscriber, you get them usually on Sunday, if not Monday early morning. So if you like behind-the-scenes stuff or watching video podcasts, I highly suggest that you go on YouTube and subscribe to the Short Box Podcast channel. And last but not least, this episode is being brought to you in large part thanks to our sponsor, Gotham City Limit Comic Shop, right? They are Jacksonville's premier shop for comics, toys, collectibles, and more. And even if you don't live in Jacks, you can still take it to the limit by shopping their online store, which will be linked in the show notes below. With the house cleaning out the way, let's set the table for our esteemed guest today. Shortbox Nation, join me in welcoming a man who has brought authentic, high-flying Lucha Libre action to comic shops all over the U.S. Let's go ahead and give it up for Jay Gonzo. What's up, Jay? How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing well, man. How you doing today?
I am well, dude. I am well. I'm so glad that we could link up after our initial Heroes Con meeting and whatnot. Hopefully the rest of your I know it's like been months now since Heroes Con. I'm sure listeners right now are like, dude, get the fuck over Heroes Con, for goodness sake. But hopefully your Heroes Con ended on a high note. It was a pleasure meeting there and all that. How'd it go for you?
Oh, it was great, man. It was right back on track. Heroes always one of my better shows. This is probably, I think, maybe possibly within a couple $100 of being my best show ever sales wise, but it was just good to see everybody. The crowd was out, I think, taking 2 years off. Definitely, Heroes is a special crowd. Like, the people who go to Heroes kind of go for a specific, like, to, engage in comic as an art form and not just the commerce or spectacle of comics. And to kind of, that level of love for the art form to be kind of denied a convention for 2 years and then to have it happen. Everyone was kind of like, just, a lot of hugs were given out, which is probably like why so much COVID swept through that place. So, yeah. So, yeah, so the show was great.
You could feel the love and the COVID. You can feel the love and the COVID.
I felt both. Yeah. I caught COVID there. Definitely, drove back 30 hours with COVID, which was unfun, but rough, still worth it. Honestly, man, if someone told me, hey, dude, we're going to do Heroes again next year, you're absolutely going to get COVID at the same level you had it. You're going to have to drive home with COVID again. I'm like, all right, let's do it. I'd do it all over again, man. It was totally worth it.
That's dedication, and I'm glad that it looked like you're covered just fine. It looked like you're doing well.
Yep.
The reason why you are here is because I stopped by your booth, captivated by, I think you had a one of those tall ass banners. It had Mano on there. The colors were vibrant. Your table was like, appealing. You were friendly, all that great energy to you. And the reason why you're here is because I picked up La Mano del Destino in trade paperback form. I know some of our listeners have already heard me champion this. I am so glad I picked up this trade in particular. You had the single issues for sale. I think you had a smaller trade paperback that Image put out. And then you had this one that on one side is English and the other side is Spanish. And I said that when I finished the English side, I was going to try practicing, learning some new Spanish by flipping through the other side. But a big reason why I'm happy I purchased this is because the back material, the back matter, is awesome. You made this so worth the price point, and the price point was super reasonable if I remember right. But you've got so many cool graphics, so many backstory. You've got like a few write-ups in the back. And for our listeners, I'll have a link to purchase it from Image in the show notes for our video folks watching on YouTube. You're looking at me hold it right now. It's gorgeous. It is so gorgeous, and I highly recommend checking that out.
So that was the Kickstarter version, and I have a few of my overages that I've been taking around. I'm getting low, like on that version of it, and I think I don't know where Image is at. I need to check on that as well. So we're kind of coming on the this is running its course. Like we're getting toward the end of the trade paperback, and I should say too that the Image version has everything that's in English in the Kickstarter version is in the Image version.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the version you have, the Kickstarter version, the kind of deluxe version. It's slightly oversized, so it's 7x11. It's a little bigger than a regular comic book. It's on newsprint. It's got the edge printing, and then it also has the Spanish, in addition to it. It's not to say that the Image version is diminished to any degree, but it is kind of like standard. It's just kind of like it's on Image's regular paper. It's Image's regular size, but it does have all of that back matter that you were talking about. And, that was important to me. Is like, if you're going to put back matter in a comic, I'm just kind of overseeing people just, like having the script in there, which is such a bullshit kind of inclusion. And so, it's like, here's the comic without the good parts. If I'm going to, a lot of people double dip, right? So a lot of the people who have bought the issues are going to buy the trade paperback. And I just wanted to give them kind of value added, like stuff that you're not going to get if you bought the issues. And also I just wanted the stuff that I enjoy when I read back matter, like stuff that like I've enjoyed in other people's back matter. Like, this is cool. Like I should do this when I do that. And I also kind of like recap a lot of the conversations I end up having with people at conventions and stuff. Like if someone's going to like, and especially now that like, there's an image version of it, there's a lot of people who are going to engage with the comic that aren't going to get it from me personally, which is kind of a new point in my career. Like I up until like a couple years ago, almost everyone who has Mano, it like got it from me, usually got it from me personally, or like a store that that I'm friendly with or whatever. So, with the image version being out in the world, it's like now it's a whole audience of people who are going to have the comic who are not going to meet me, who might not. So I want to at least have the conversations that I have with people who bought the issues at conventions or have bought them for me personally. I want to at least kind of have an opportunity for me to have the same conversations and express the same ideas that with them that wouldn't since I can't get it from me personally. If you're going to ask somebody for $25 or what or 50 for the larger ones, like I want to make sure that they walk away from it going like, yeah, that was worth the money. Like I don't want anybody to be like, that kind of was bullshit. So I just really wanted to give people some bang for their buck.
Well, look, mission accomplished. I'll tell you that
Thanks,
much.
man.
I'm so glad I didn't. I'm so glad I didn't go the cheap route, and I went and splurged a little bit because it's a beautiful book. And like I said, I'll have the image version, a link to buy that in the show notes. But Gonzo, I want to take a step back, man, and let's talk about your origin story. Every great comic book, especially superheroes, have awesome origin stories, right? So I understand that you were born and raised in Cypress, California. You now reside in Arizona. What are some of the distinct, I guess, differences between the two places culturally speaking? And then I want to know, what's the comic scene like in Arizona?
So I grew up. Cypress is kind of on it's on the edge of LA County, right? So like Cypress is like the ass end of Orange County. Like it technically is Orange County, but it's not like whatever you're thinking about. Like all the shit they put on TV about Orange County is nowhere near where I grew up. Like I literally, when I rode my bike, like I went to the High School of the Arts, and when I would ride my bike to the High School of the Arts, I literally was on riding on the border. Like I could look to the right and there's LA County, and then to the left is Orange County. So, but being where it is, it's a little more diverse, like LA is a lot of kind of small little villages of like cultures, like you can be in the Mexican part of town, you can, be in the Vietnamese part of town, or you can be, and they're very kind of compartmentalized. At least LA can be, at least LA County, and especially like the neighborhoods in LA. But Orange County was a little more like just mixed, like some of my best friends growing up were like Filipino or Vietnamese, and then it is an area that is extremely diverse. And so getting into things like manga very early, like I'm talking like, 81, 82, like there just happened to be a Japanese toy store and it had, like manga there. And I love comics. So like, hey, let's check this out. So I was excited to see like Robotech happen, cause I had seen like Macross stuff, years before Robotech ever hit the airwaves and stuff like that. So yeah, and it was a really good place to kind of, not be hung up on kind of like, your ethnicity, I guess, to some degree, and kind of, and also intellectually, like, I know I'm a minority, but like, I really live, both in Arizona and California. Like I live a lot amongst a lot of Latinos. So it's not until I really venture out into like other parts of the country, I'm like, oh yeah, I am a minority, so, but it was kind of cool to like be able to grow up that way. It was, I didn't have to feel otherized or exoticized either. You know what I mean? Like, cause, there's a lot of Mexicans in the world, especially in where I live. So it's not like, I'm not like some, like from Sri Lanka or something where like, people are like, oh, my exotic friend, it was just, it all seemed very kind of like, like mixed together in a way that was fairly natural. And it wasn't until kind of like, much later in life that I can see how kind of compartmentalized things could be, and then most of my life happened, even though I grew up in Cyprus, like most of my family lived in like Montebello, Pico Rivera. So like I was heading into East Los, like a lot of the time for like my childhood. A lot of my childhood was kind of spent there. I knew that I always knew kind of intellectually, like that there was, or I guess not, but I knew like maybe emotionally, like on a visceral level, that there was this kind of like culture that was of my kind of grandparents and aunts and uncles kind of generation that I was from, but wasn't necessarily steeped in completely, that I could kind of, I could kind of like, dip into this world of like, of Chicano culture, and then also live in the kind of, freedom of not having like the rigid, like not being like dogmatic about that culture. Right. It was just kind of something I could enjoy as much as I wanted to, and then kind of live, as free as I wanted to in Cyprus. I guess it was very freeing. It's probably there wasn't a lot of like, because it was so mixed, there wasn't a lot of like social constraints put on you, like it was just, was kind of free to do whatever. And it was like, the 70s and 80s in California. It was ideal. Like, it was great. I was, 6 miles from the beach. I could be there in 20 minutes on my bike if I really hustled. So, I mean, and that wasn't lost on me as a kid. Like, I realized how idyllic it was.
So during your upbringing, like, did you have access to comic books growing up, or do you remember your first conscious exposure to like a comic book?
Yeah. So that's a funny, like, LA, Orange County kind of difference. One of the actually does lead to comics. Like, so I was a big Spider-Man fan. Like, I just loved Spider-Man as a kid. And, the Orange County Register, which is a newspaper out there, did not carry the Spider-Man newspaper strip, but the LA Times does. And so whenever I would go to my grandparents' house, I would want to read the newspaper because it had the Spider-Man strip in there. And then my dad's father started cutting them out for me. And so I would, like, if we took a month or two off, I would go there and then there'd just be a stack of Spider-Man strips for me. And I realized it's like, that's the worst version of Spider-Man to like be your first exposure, but it was I just love the art style. And so, I fell even more in love with like kind of the comic art form. And then also at my grandparents' house, I remember, because I like the Spider-Man thing, the newspaper strip, my grandfather bought me this set of, Marvel stamps. They were like a little stamp pad, maybe 1x2 stamps.
Wasn't it Kirby artwork?
It was, exactly. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. It was like the late 77, 78, somewhere around there. They had these like set of stamp pads, and then it came with a Thor stamp pad art pad to stamp them on. And I just remember looking at the Silver Surfer specifically, and just how simple it was, but how powerful it was, and that fascinated me. But the bodegas I would go to in like Montebello and Pico, my nana and I would like walk to this bodega up the road from her house. They didn't have any American comic books; they just had like Lucha Libre stuff. And so that kind of began my love for like Lucha Libre. I didn't buy any comics there because my Spanish is kind of terrible. So, I couldn't read them, but I would look through them when I was there. But it was in Cyprus and back in the Orange County side of that where I first discovered like a spinner rack, like at a 7-Eleven. My buddy, Arthur, we were just hanging out one day, probably like 9 or 10 years old. And he's just like, hey, I gotta go buy my new comics. I'm like, like comic books. Fuck, they still make those, and so, we go to 7-Eleven and like, he bought like a G.I. Joe, I think issue 12 or 13. And I bought one too, just cause it like looked cool. And then just like looking through that comic, and it was all an art style I really appreciated, because Spider-Man was very different than all the art style in the comic section of the newspaper. It was just that kind of like Marvel house style, that kind of like Kirby, Romita-esque kind of house style. And and even the G.I. Joe stuff that was coming out. So when I saw the comic, I was just like in love. And then I instantly like went back the next day and I just bought everything Marvel. I bought, I think, and this is like 84, 85. It's like 85. My first Thor I buy is just a Simonson Thor because he's just on the book, and I'm buying Frank Miller Daredevils because Miller's drawing Daredevil. And just like, it's just this, this golden age. Like I start becoming a collector of comics in like, mid 85. And so, that mythic 1986, like Watchmen happens, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, like all of that's just what was happening. And the first day I went to a comic shop was the day that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 came out. The second issue had come out. And it's just a thing like, oh, indie comics, I'll check these out. Just bought it, for, I don't know, $1.25 or whatever it was, like not for no money at all. It's just like, oh yeah, it's just the stuff, it's not until, 20 years later that you look back and you're like, holy crap, like all these like epic creators were just doing stuff while it was just what was out. So, yeah, it was, a little bit of Spider-Man and a little bit of G.I. Joe that really kind of made me a comic fan. Like, it was that first G.I. Joe issue, but I think it was the X-Men stuff. Like my first X-Men issue is like 203, something like that. Like there's they were doing all the solo stories. It was just after the trial of Magneto. And because I've gone back and read some of those, but I read a solo, Nightcrawler story. It was like the first X-Men comic I bought. It followed shortly by, within a month or two, is X-Men 205, which is Barry Windsor Smith drawing Wolverine in the snow, fighting the Reavers and Lady Deathstrike, which is one of the best all-time, uncanny issues that's ever come out. And it was just like the third X-Men comic I bought because it was what was, out that month. And I bought it at like, Thrifties or something, like it wasn't even 7-Eleven. So
everyone tuning in right now is like, oh, Butter's getting a Marvel boner right now. Hearing Gonzo talk about all this. You piqued my interest when you mentioned Lucha Libre comics, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Lucha Libre, but what were Lucha Libre comic books like? Like, was there one company in particular putting them out? Like, who were some of the artists, or was there any, like, American artists or writers doing those? Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YOO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YOO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show.
Well, the ones that I saw were still an extension of this guy named Jorge Cruz, who did El Santo comics in the 60s. And I can speak on this, but there's better sources for it. There's actually a guy named Keith Rainville who's written a lot. He's got a website. I don't remember what his website's called now, but he does like a blog site. It's really insightful. And he's where I get most of my information on this. I remember seeing these as a kid, and then after the fact, he's put context to them. So what they would do is they would get wrestlers, one of which being like El Santo was like the kind of biggest cash cow. And they would have these wrestlers go into a studio and just take like, I don't know, a few hundred pics in different poses and like, photographs of them. And then the wrestler would like go about his day. And then, they would have artists take those photos and like remove all the background elements. And they would take like the photo and then they would draw in the rest of what was happening. And so It's not quite fumetti because it's not photo like, the Italians do like the fumetti, which is just all
like a photo collage.
Yeah, exactly. But so there is an artistry to it. And so, they would just have these fantastical stories. And there's actually, God, they were doing at one point, El Santo is selling like 3 million a week or something like that. But in Mexico in the 60s, when you bought comic books, you could buy your comic for cover price. After you read it, you could bring it back and get a credit for return it to buy more comics, get like a partial credit. And then the people would resell the used ones as used on like, they were getting read like 6 or 7 times. And so the numbers of like who was actually reading these El Santo comics back in the day is like staggering. And it's like 3 times a week. And they're a little smaller than an American comic, but not many of them are around now because like so many people, people would like, sell them 6. Oh yeah. They're reading these like 6, 7 times. And so if you find like an old El Santo comic, they feel like they're on toilet paper. They're like just tissue paper thin. Jorge Cruz, like literally his name is bigger than El Santo's on the comic cover. He was a self-promoter, if anything. And he did other, like Tinemblas and Solitario and like these other characters. He did other wrestlers. Like El Santo was just the most famous of them. Anyway, he and El Santo have like a falling out, but whatever deal El Santo had with Cruz didn't preclude him from using the name, but it precluded him from using something about the likeness. And so there's a point at which Jorge Cruz is still putting out El Santo comics where he has like a El Santo doppelganger taking the photos and doing the poses now. And on his mask, he has like an S on the forehead, and El Santo is just a silver mask. So it's like, so I have some of the fake El Santo comics, and those cost me like a pretty good chunk of change, and those are like tissue thin. So, Cruz continued to do that for years and years. I don't know how or where that ever gets settled. But like, yeah, it was big business. And most of the stuff, at least from the kind of golden era of Lucha Libre comics, is that faux fumetti kind of like very specific to Mexico process of photos inserted into blank backgrounds that then get drawn on that have like, werewolves or vampires or whatever happening in them. And they were pretty fantastic. They were like the movies. They were pretty fantastical. They weren't like, it wasn't like storyline continuation. It wasn't like, I mean, he would wrestle in them. He would fight, bad guys, but it wasn't like my comic is about wrestling. It's about like in the ring trying to get the belt back. They weren't necessarily those kind of storylines. They were more like, like gimmick storylines.
Right? Like contained.
Yeah. I mean, they were, yeah, absolutely. I don't think they were quite, I don't think they were continuing storylines where like, oh, there's this guy again,
Speaking about El Santo, I was flipping through I finished the main story of La Mano del Destino, and I was flipping through the back matter, and you had mentioned, this being a love letter to El Santo, in addition to a lot of other things that you love. And, admittedly, my Lucha Libre knowledge is, zero. So I, just looking up El Santo on Google and just, man, that was that was only just a shallow research I did prior to, hopping on here, but just finding out what he meant to, I guess, safe to say like Mexican culture in general, and just like, being the godfather of Lucha Libre. But I went on YouTube looking for some of his matches, and instead I found a few trailers for like some black and white movies. And one that just had me kind of cracking up was him versus some like Martian invaders who were also wrestlers. And that shit was just like, was awesome.
Oh, those movies are great, man. I highly recommend one of his first. So he starred in a couple movies initially where he's just kind of like a or he's like a bodyguard, or he's in the movie, but the movies aren't about him. His first real starring role is him versus the Vampire Women. And that movie's great. Most of those runtime of those movies is padded out with actual like matches. Like they actually just will film a match. Like if him on the road, they'll just like use the footage of him fighting some jobber out in like, some small town, insert it into the storyline. There's a couple like in El Santo versus the Zombies. There is a match that is part and parcel of the storyline, but more often than not, it's just like he's hunting down vampire women and he like looks at his watch. He's like, oh, I gotta go to work. And then they'll just insert like a 20-minute scene of him having a wrestling match. And then back to the act. Oh, now I'm back to looking for vampire women.
Give me that job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, everyone's got a job they got to do. So, so they're great, and they extend kind of the mythos of the character, outside the ring, and kind of like it speaks to their prowess as a strong man, a force to be reckoned with, and it all kind of builds the mythos of these guys. But yeah, El Santo is like he's the Wayne Gretzky and Michael Jordan, all
well
like if someone knows Mexican wrestler, they know El Santo. Those movies are great. Like, I think he gets into the 80s. He's still making them, maybe the late 70s. There's one with him and Mil Mascaras and Blue Demon. Those are kind of the triumvirate of like great wrestlers, where they go, it's like them in the Bermuda Triangle. I forget the plot line of that, but there's some scenes of those guys just hanging out, and they're like the fucking coolest dudes ever. Just to see that, like, they're just at a like, poolside at a resort. There's like regular people, like, girls in bikinis, like hanging out. And then these dudes come rocking up with their masks on and their casual wear. And I'm like, it's the fucking coolest thing on the planet, man. Like, you cannot tell me that's like, nobody is unmoved by watching those guys walk into a scene. So, yeah.
A few of the images that showed up in Google was of them three, like that holy trinity of Lucha Libre. And you're right. It was like, damn, I kind of want to be friends with them, but I know I'm not tough enough. I feel like they would fuck with me heavy, but
yeah, they're the manliest of men. Yeah.
Damn right. And, I just don't compare. But I was curious, like, have you ever, did you ever attend any like Lucha Libre? Have you attended Lucha Libre matches?
Yeah. Just modern stuff. I mean, obviously not as a kid, like there weren't, there may or may not have been stuff happening in LA. There wasn't stuff happening in Orange County anyway, or at least where I was. I was more of a movie fan of the Lucha Libre, and like I would watch it like at my grandmother's house. I would watch the matches and stuff. But my grandmother, the one who I would watch TV at, like my mom's parents, she kind of didn't care for Lucha Libre. Like she kind of thought, like I would, she's like, it's like dumb stuff. Like she kind of thought it was dumb. Yeah, exactly. And so I was more, but I could get away with watching the movies because there was more than just wrestling happening there. And it's in Spanish, so I can barely understand what's happening. But I was a big like WWF fan, like as I'm like 8 or 9 when like Hogan becomes champion and WWF goes national, and like the cartoon happens, and like I was a huge Piper fan and all of that stuff. So I ended up kind of being more of an American mark, and it wasn't until, maybe like my 30s, I was like kind of like, man, I got to get back into Mexican wrestling. And like, I kind of, I'd gotten out of even American wrestling, And I just had friends who were still into it, and they were talking about like some, Rey Mysterio and other guys, and like I'm like, oh, they like luchadors, and then I kind of just gently I guess with more interest got back into Mexican wrestling, but yeah, I was trying to think what I was watching. Like I started kind of thinking about drawing some luchadors, and so I was doing some research, and then I saw that there was a show in LA happening, and I was going to be in LA that weekend, and I was like, yeah, I gotta check that out. Like if it's still happening, I gotta go see stuff. And so, yeah, I just went and I'm like, oh yeah, this is incredible. Like I forgot how great this is. And so, I've never been to an American wrestling match. I've only been to Lucha Libre matches. But I have, but yeah, there's like a lot of really good stuff. There's a couple shows in LA I check out. One of which is, called Lucha Vavoom, which is burlesque and Lucha Libre, which is kind of fantastic.
Oh, sounds right up my alley.
Yeah. It's great. If you can catch a Lucha Vavoom show, you definitely should. And then locally, there's just like literally there's parking lot shows that have some really great talent, and they're free. Like I can just go to a Food City on a Saturday night. They've got a ring set up, and if it's not too hot in Arizona, like you can hang out and have a good time, get some good food. And I got to say those parking lot shows and those gymnasium shows are fantastic, man. Those guys put in the work. They're there to entertain. Everyone's giving it their all. No one's phoning it in. Yeah, and I love those. And so there's a lot of like smaller local talent guys that I really enjoy. And then there's some AAA guys, CMLL guys who will kind of do shows. They'll travel regionally. Like so I'll if I catch a show here or Vegas or something, like I'll see some guys who are like bigger names. Putting on shit for like $8. If I do have to pay to get into one of those shows, like I don't think I've ever paid more than $20 at the most to get in, and I guarantee I'm having a better time than sitting in like the 82nd row at like a WWE show,
I love me some economical fun. So that sounds right up my alley.
Exactly.
I went to my first kind of like major wrestling event earlier this year. Actually, I think it was this year. It was Monday Night Raw was here in town, and I went to go see that. And it was an experience, man. It brought me back to like my childhood and really being into wrestling and watching of my uncle and all that. So it was an experience, and I can only imagine what seeing a Lucha Libre match would be like. I imagine way more like kind of like a party vibe and high energy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and those guys always end up in the crowd and stuff too. So there's a lot of interactivity happening. Yep.
I feel like every wrestling fan I know has thought of this, and some of them normally have it ready to go to the hip to answer this question. But have you thought about what would be your wrestler name and your signature move if you could be a wrestler?
I'd probably have to just be Gonzo, right?
You already kind of got a good you're right. You got a good default wrestling name already.
I was a gymnast when I was a kid. Actually, for most of my childhood, I was a gymnast. So it would have to be something like super acrobatic, like a backflip off the top rope kind of finisher sort of thing. Like, definitely. Ooh, I was very good at the floor. I could do a lot of flips. I could do a lot of tucks, like back tuck sort of thing. So I'd have to do like maybe a doubled back tuck to like, kind of plancha sort of thing. So like something off the top rope, something back flippy. I don't know what I would call it, but it would definitely be that.
If I could do some flips, I definitely would incorporate it. But I got some skinny ass legs and bad ankles. So I need to figure something else out. I think I'm going to play into the whole nationality kind of gimmick. And unfortunately, there's already a actual UFC fighter by the name of the Moroccan Mauler. So I'm going to go with the Moroccan Mouthpiece to kind of play on the whole broadcaster thing. And I think my signature move would be like the ear explosion, like the ear implosion or some shit like that. Something with ear and explosion. And my move would be I take your ear and either I yell into it or I just like fucking, like grandma, style pinch your earlobe and some shit like that.
I'm into it, man. I like it.
Thank you for sharing your background and getting me hype and interested in Lucha Libre and wanting to watch some Monday Night Raw tomorrow. You have got some big names backing your work. You've got, and co-signing your talent at that. You've got folks like Todd McFarlane, comic book legend. And you've also got a lengthy foreword in the trade paperback of La Mano del Destino from Evan Dorkin. For those unfamiliar of who Evan Dorkin is, he is the creator of the Milk and Cheese comic book. He's also a TV writer for shows like Space Coast, Coast to Coast, Batman Beyond. He's also worked on Ben 10 and a whole lot more. Gonzo, how's it feel to have like these kinds of cosigns and reassurance?
It feels great, man. Like it feels very validating, I guess is kind of the, Yeah. I mean, Evan became a friend of mine because he just liked my work. Like, he just saw what I was doing. He's like, oh shit, this looks cool. Didn't even realize that that's who he was for the longest time. We just talked a bit. And then when we walked away, the guy next to me was like, oh, how do you know Evan Dorkin? I'm like, oh, that's Evan Dorkin? Like, I didn't even know that was it. But we just became friends at Heroes, actually. That's where we first met. And then over the years, we've hung out, we've had, meals together, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, I mean, it was just cool. It just feels good. Like, when people you appreciate your work. I don't know how to take it. I'm getting, again, with the Image book kind of being out in the world and kind of doing its thing, there's like, I was just at San Diego, and I kind of kept running into people who knew who I was, and people whose work I absolutely knew. Like, just kind of names in comics where I'm like, shit, like, how do you even know who I am, dude? Like, that doesn't seem possible. So to me, I kind of, because it seems so implausible and impossible, like, I just kind of like, I'm like, oh, cool, and then it's not till later that I'm like, fuck, did that guy say you like my book? Did, like, and I've had that happen with some, like, I don't want to name drop, but that's happened with some huge names that, like, they have no business reading my comic book. Like, what are you doing, man? So that it's been incredibly gratifying. But it also is encouraging in a way that, like, because before I'd like finished the series, like, Evan was a fan and encouraging, and it's just like, well, if Evan Dorkin thinks it's quality, then I should keep going, right? Like, it's kind of, because being a comic artist, there's a lot of dark nights of the soul. You're when you're working on an 80-page book and you're on page like 57, and you're just like, fuck, like, I don't, something has to motivate you, because it isn't until you're done that people get to enjoy it, but you still have to spend the time to do it all. And when you're kind of alone and in your head and isolated, it's hard to get any kind of perspective on if what you're doing has any merit or worth, at all. And the feedback I've gotten has definitely at least somewhat convinced me that maybe I'm not crazy. Like, oh, maybe I do know what I'm doing here.
This book is evidence that a pro is doing this, man. And I'm glad that you're getting the validation from folks like, Todd. You could stop at just Todd McFarlane itself. But when I saw the, almost 2 pages forward by Evan Dorkin, I was like, now the right people are taking a look at this and looking at this book and giving it its just due. So I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
On the topic of Image Comics, we've primarily here on the show, we've been, focused on celebrating 30 years of Image Comics. This year marks 30 years of Image Comics. Last episode, we dedicated it to Savage Dragon and Eric Larson. We've got another episode dropping next month about our favorite Image writers. So I'd love to hear your opinion on the success of Image Comics and what the publisher means to a creator like you, and also someone that I imagine that you were there for, like the birth of Image, the heyday of McFarlane, Liefeld, and Lee and all of them. Like, what are some words that come to mind when you think of Image Comics?
I mean, empowering, I think, more than anything, because those were guys who just, were making a lot of money for a lot of people and getting none of it. And, and kind of being told that whatever they were being handed was more than enough, and that they should, maybe shut the fuck up and not complain about it. And I just like that they took control of their own destiny. And they're like, yeah, we might fail, but we also might succeed, but we're going to do it on our own terms. And that just kind of, it's shit. It's what I did with Mano, I mean, like, I shopped it around. I got past, everyone seemed to enjoy it, but no one thought they could sell it. So I just got, I got glowing rejection letters, which was great. People were like, this is fucking dope, but we can't, but at least taught me that there's an avenue to self-publish, to just do your own thing. Like, you don't need to, like, you can bet on yourself, I guess, is kind of what I saw from those guys. And so if anything, that's what I've done my career in comics, is just bet on myself. Even when I was told, by people that it was a crazy idea or that it wouldn't work. And I just had enough faith that, like, there'd be enough audience to support it. And here I am. So, I got that from Image, and then just kind of like, comics could be more than what comics were. It's like every year Image does something that expands the kind of the idea of what comics can be, and I think that, in a day and age where I don't have to explain that, that I don't work for Marvel or DC, like, that's, it's just, people accept that now, that you're like, oh, you're a comic artist, and like, what do you do? And you don't have to be like, well, I don't do Superman or Spider-Man, nowadays people just kind of have an idea that there is more to it. And I think a lot of that is kind of, predicated on the success of Image Comics and what those guys have done for the industry. So, definitely, I think more than anything, just empowerment. It just made me feel like I could do this, that I didn't need and I didn't need permission, I guess, is kind of the big lesson from Image, is that I think too many people in creative endeavors need a lot of permission, and in comics is like, there's no barrier to entry. You can just make comic books.
I love that word empowerment. That and you explained it so well. I also want to say that glowing rejection letters it would make for a great band name, and those are the type of rejection letters that I want to get in my future. Let's go ahead and really dive into La Mano del Destino. I want to go ahead and read the solicitation that is up on the Image website, and then I want you to add anything else to it. The solicitation goes something like this. La Mano del Destino is set in the swanky 1960s Mexico where Lucha Libre is intrinsically woven into all aspects of society and tells the tale of a once champion luchador who, after being betrayed by his friends and unmasked in the ring, agrees to a Faustian bargain with a mysterious promoter. He gains a new power in the identity of La Mano del Destino in order to exact revenge upon his betrayers. How's that sound? Would you add anything else to that?
So I actually wrote that. So I mean, I don't know. Have we ever?
I wish you would have hyped that up. Like, I don't know, man. That's probably some of the best copy I've ever heard in my life. Big shout outs to that guy. Get him a raise.
Again, like with Image, Image will let you do as much or as little as you want or can do, right? They'll fill in what you can't do. So I was like, I wrote the solicitation. I'm like, here's what I've been selling it as, and they're like, okay, cool, we'll use that. So that's been, it's been cool. So the only thing I didn't put in the solicit that I would add to the solicit is that it is it's Chicano ass comics, man. It's like it's done by a Chicano for Chicanos. Like it is brown on purpose. So like that's kind of my only thing that I and I stole that
from. I like it so much.
Oh yeah. I stole that from John Jennings. He says that, like, he's a black guy. I know. He's like, I'm black on purpose. Like, Jennings, he's won a bunch of Eisners and stuff. He's a great contributor to comics. Like, writes, draws. But he does, like, we used to do this convention that was all black and brown comic creators. And he used to say that, like, like the stuff he does is black on purpose. And so I say I'm brown on purpose. But should point out that I do write and draw the comic. Like, I do everything on I'm a one-man show. So, like,
I've got it noted here that you are the complete auteur when it comes to this book. You did an excellent job on, I think, all moving parts of the comic making process, such as writing, penciling, inking, coloring. You've done and even lettering. So you've done the what is it for 5? It's quad for 4. I forget what is 5.
Is that Quint?
Quint, yes, good job.
Yeah.
You are the the quintessential comic book master, and you've shown that skill here in this excellent project. Well, I wanted to know from you, what is the most challenging and most rewarding part of the whole process? Was there one role that you really liked and one that maybe was a little more challenging?
God, I'm trying to I think I like writing more than I thought I would. Like, that was surprising. Like, I just wanted, I thought I was just an artist, and like with a story to tell. And then I realized that with the story to tell means that I am actually a writer, like I'm writing the story. So I enjoyed that. And I enjoy, being able to put in like things that are just there for my entertainment, like just dumb little background elements. Like, I try to make myself like laugh, when I'm like just crack myself up with just dumb little shit that I'm putting in there. Cause I think comics should be kind of dumb, like it just, I think once they try to be smart, then they get really dumb. So I'm just trying to be dumb and hope that maybe it comes across as smart. Like, I just want to make, dumb, fun comics that are engaging more than anything. And also I want to, part of like the paper that I use and the way that I color the book and like all of that limited, like I want to give people an experience more than I just want to tell them a story. And I think a lot of comics, a lot of mainstream comics have just been about giving you a story. Like, here's what happens. And then, and there's a lot of that. And I want people to kind of have the experience of feeling the paper and smelling the ink on it. And then like seeing the colors and getting like a full experience more than just here's the things that have happened that I want you to know about. So, I do enjoy the writing more than I thought I would. I hate the logistics of comic book creation, man. Like, being the problem solver, being the guy who has to ship everything, the guy who has to address every envelope, the guy who has to go to press checks and all of that stuff. Like, man, like, and especially when there's problems, like with my Kickstarter, there was a lot of issues, and like, I just want people to do their fucking job when they said they were going to do their job. And I don't want to have to like chase people down. I don't want to have to like, send harassing emails. I don't want to have to talk to my lawyer. Like, I just want to make the comics. I don't want to be like the kind of business guy. And so the business end of it, like, I'm terrible at, and admittedly so. Like, I don't, I know people, like a lot of people will tell, like, will talk to me about like what I sell my stuff for, like price wise. And they're like, oh, you could make a lot more money. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, I just want to cover my costs. Like, I'm not in this. Look, man, if I wanted to make a ton of money, I would not have gotten into comic books. Like, that would not have been my career choice. The business end of it, and negotiating deals and talking to people and all of that. And I'm just honest to a fault about it. Like whenever I've had to deal with like, agents or whatever. And I had at one point I kind of had competing agents, and I was just honest with both of them. I was like, hey, this guy's offering me X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, I got to say it's tempting because like this means this, that, and they're like, well, let me see what I can do. And then I would go to the first guy and I go, well, that guy's going to see if he can't, just so that guy's going to try to match your offer, just like I'm never trying to like scam anybody. I'm never trying to like pit anyone against each other. And when it comes to businessy stuff, like I'm just really honest about it, like this is what I want to get out of these things. This is what I'm hoping to achieve. And then in the hopes that people are just going to be that honest with me. And then sometimes they're not. And then that's the part that sucks, man. It's like, look, I'm being totally upfront. I'm trying to be as honest as I can with like all of these business expectations. So yeah, I guess the short answer is just the business shit, man. I can't, I hate it. I wish I was successful enough to hire somebody just to handle that aspect, just to answer fucking emails. Like, to be honest with you.
Spoken like a true artist. That is that is a message and answer I've heard echoed among many artists I've had the opportunity to interview. Is they would rather just keep their head down, do the art, all that stuff, and forget about everything you said, like the logistics and the business side of it. So glad that you survived that experience.
No, I think,
glad that we got this book into the world. And speaking about the comic, you've described this comic as a love letter to Lucha Libre, your Latinx culture, Silver Age comics, and of course El Santo, one of the greatest legends in Mexican sports. You said that it's everything you love about the comic book medium. And as a man who dabbles in a few artistic endeavors and fields, including graphic design and tattooing, what makes comic books such a special medium to you?
Because so every comic exists uniquely in the person who's reading its head, because they have to fill in the space between the panels, and what they fill that space in with is their personal experience. And so you're asking the reader to co-author the comic with you always, because they're the ones who provide the sound, they're the ones who provide the movement, they're the ones who provide the things that aren't there. And comics is a medium of it's a reductive medium. Like, you're taking out things to make your message clearer, and you're asking the viewer to fill in those gaps that you've pared away in the service of effective storytelling or in the limitations of the medium. So I think that's what makes comics so unique, is that there's so many obstacles to kind of be overcome. In it's a visual medium, but there's no movement, there's no sound, like those sorts of things, and there's no depth really. There's no parallax that creates the illusion of depth. So those are the things I'm always trying to overcome with comics. Like, they're still, so I try to add movement. They're silent, so I try to add some kind of sound. They're flat, so I try to add some depth. Like, those are all the things that I kind of come after. And I also think that they're a bit of a magic trick, in that, like, when you go in to see a magician, it's a trick, but then you can still have your mind blown. And I think that once you tell someone, I'm going to trick you, and then you still do something they can't explain, it's even more impressive, because they knew you were going to trick them. And there's a quote I use, I think it's John Updike, who said that all art carries with it the need to confess its artifice, right? Like to tell you that it is a curated, like, made up thing. And I think that comics, just by nature of their format, confess their artifice, right? Like, they're letting you know that it's a curated reality, that it's a made up thing. But I think, much like a magician might say, I'm going to show you a trick, so it's made up, it's not really magic, but then still do something that you can't explain is even more impressive and more engaging. And so most of what I do with comics is also a confession of artifice. Like, I'm making you aware of the process in the product itself. Like, I show the overprinting of the blacks, which is how 60s comics used to look. And it's not, it is partially trying to replicate the era of which the comic lives in and kind of like look like old comics, but it is also a confession of artifice. Like, this is a product. This is a thing that's manufactured. And I think that allows it to live in a space that is free from comparison to reality or, fidelity to any kind of reality, and just allows it to live as allegory or metaphor, which I think has more impact than any kind of literal truth. So that is like my high-minded way of talking about my dumb wrestling book where guys mass beat on each other.
One, excellently said. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. Secondly, your joke that you just made about, this high-minded way of viewing this comic book where, if you were to really boil down the elements, it's wrestlers fighting one another, and really a tale of identity versus destiny, right? Like I think at the core, you could drill it down to that. In regards to the dialogue, I thought added a very it elevated that, a very like boiled down a formula. I thought your writing and your dialogue was very poetic. Your vocabulary in this was like really verbose for the subject matter. I think I'm finally getting it together. Yeah, it was like really verbose for the subject matter. And I think it added a layer of sophistication that I wasn't expecting off the bat, but it added like a really welcomed and surprising level of sophistication to the drama and story. And I think it was like and you had like the right amount of flowery language to make a good juxtaposition to all the action and adrenaline being injected into my eyeballs, right? Like I went into it thinking like, oh, this is going to be a really fun comic book about wrestling. But what I got was like a very like honest, open, a very honest and introspective look into, the culture behind wrestling. And I was curious to know, like, who are some of your favorite authors that inspire you and influence your work from a writing perspective? Because I won't be able to shut up about the writing in this book was really refreshing.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Well, I mean, that was all an attempt to kind of, sound like Stan Lee wrote it in the 60s, right? Like just that kind of purple prose. But
reading through some of these, I was like, damn, like not only is he channeling like Jack Kirby art style with a lot of like these big bombastic figures and like, just kind of breaking the fourth wall in regards to like the action. I thought that the language reminded me a lot of like old school Stan Lee, just like being very like poetic and dramatic, when it came to his verbal storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, it's all operatic tones, right? Like it's melodrama.
Yes.
I mean, and melodrama, I think gets like kind of a short shrift, but I think that melodrama is part and parcel to the pageantry of Lucha Libre. And it is kind of culturally significant to like my, Chicano, like my Mexican culture. Like look at like telenovelas, like those are melodramatic, right? And there's just, we are a culture of not only feeling our feelings, but over feeling our feelings. And I think that bombast of that works well in comic books, especially when talking about a subject that is bombastic. And I think that was the genius of Lee, is that he would take these kind of heady ideas and turn them into these like, faux operatic tones that kind of, again, no one talks like that. But I don't think it's any, but I think that in its unreality, it allows you to kind of focus on the emotional truth of it rather than get hung up on like the realism of it. And I think that, you look at, what's his name? God, I had his name and I just lost it. The guy who did the West Wing and, the creator of that, like, nobody talks like that. It's obviously, or even Mamet, like those are guys who like, they have a tone and a banter to the way that, or like, Michael Mann, or those guys who like, they just, there's a cadence to the way that they write dialogue that is unreal, but somehow has more weight to it because of its unreality. And it was just, it was my attempt, or not my attempt, it was my purpose was to make it sound like a 60s comic first and foremost, because at the end of the day, I am taking, I'm appropriating and subverting white male super, power fantasy and making it about what it means to be like Chicano. And, in as much as my book is about like dudes and mass beating on each other, it is kind of my meditation on the internalized respectability politics of the Chicano diaspora. But first and foremost, it needs to be a fun comic that is engaging and dynamic. And so I took that tone to kind of both replicate the tone of an old 60s comic, but also in replicating it, kind of subverting it just by way of its subject matter. And again, man, it's just dudes and mass beating on each other. Like this is all so below the surface stuff. But I do enjoy the idea of taking this kind of like, male superhero paragon, like, and just wrenching it over by use of color palette and subject matter and turning it into something that like lives in contrast to that other kind of, 60s comic book. So, yeah, man, I saw that as like a fun thing to try to do. But more than anything, I just wanted that sense of melodrama because, that's what wrestling is, like when guys, if you're playing actual sports, if a boxer gets hurt, he's going to try to hide that he got hurt more than anything, right? He's going to make it seem like he's fine. in wrestling, if a dude takes a chair to the back, he's going to like arch his back over and like, reach out in pain and, roll on the ground and stomp his feet. And like, they have to sell the emotionality of it. And I think that much like in opera or even an old drama where like, the Greeks had dramas with masks on that over accentuated their emotion. I think that what is the word I'm looking for? That inflation of the emotionality is something that we as a species, as human beings, just appreciate. Like, I think that we just, when things are overwrought and melodramatic, I think that it tickles some primordial part of our being that we can then get past the quote unquote realism and just get to the emotional truth, because that's all I'm kind of like. I just want to elicit emotion from my viewer more than I want them to kind of think about things, because when as a comic artist, you talk to a lot of young aspiring comic writers, a lot of comic artists. And, I always let people who want to break into the business remember, like, nobody gives a shit about what you write and nobody gives a shit about what you draw. What they give a shit about is how they feel about what you write and you draw. And so every word, every pose, every panel, every color choice should be in the service of eliciting the emotional truth of the moment. And everything I do is just to squeeze as much of that emotional truth out as possible. Because I think that a lot of maybe not great writers and a lot of not great artists, they kind of think that the truth of the moment is apparent, right? Like, oh, like, he said he's sad, so he's sad, like, or I made him frowning, so he's sad, obviously. But if it's like, no, man, you got to turn the dial up on that because it's a 3x4 panel on a page that has 9 other panels on it. So, yeah, man, like that's all kind of where that language came from. And also it's just fucking fun, man. Like, you gotta write a sentence like the purveyor of purloined promises like that. Like that just feels good to write it down. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I want to get to the art, because aside from excellent, vocabulary and great written words, the art, man. Once again, so glad I bought this oversized trade because I think it needed the extra, what did you say, 7 by
11? Yes,
7
so
by
like,
11.
Yeah. It's only, it gains like a half inch. I mean, but it's just enough to feel bigger. Yeah.
It made a difference, right? The art is bombastic. There's a lot of energy. I mean, I think you really kept. It feels like you're in the wrestling ring, and some of these like full page spreads and double page spreads as well. I instantly get that energy of like that Jack Kirby energy where all the figures are exaggerated, but with like exaggerated, but that it's on purpose and meaningful. And then I also get like some Jim Steranko in there too when I'm looking at this art. But I feel like those are two obvious comparisons considering that you purposely wanted this to feel like a 60s comic book. So I'll also throw in a modern day reference, and that is if you're a fan, I feel like of Lee, I think he's Lee
Bermejo.
Thank you so much, Bermejo. Yeah. I think some of your inking and textures remind me of him as well. Were you channeling any artist in particular when doing this?
Well, definitely Jack Kirby. Like I really. So I was trying to think. So when I was starting to do this, I don't know what art style I was drawing in, but I was just, you know what? I did like a single image of a luchador, and I just decided that he needed to look like the 60s. So I had like and it wasn't even Le Mano, it was just a luchador I had done in like 2005, 2006. And I was like, oh, it'd be fun to kind of like draw him like in the 60s, because I had done a piece of art for my father for like his birthday. He's a big Green Lantern fan, so I drew this Hal Jordan Green Lantern, and I decided to draw it like a 60s comic because I had just read the trade paperback or the hardback, the or whatever omnibus edition of New Frontier, the Darwin Cook book. And in the back of that, Cook talks about how he originally was going to draw the whole book like Jack Kirby. And so he had some sketches. There's some images where he takes like this bug image and turns it into Superman and other things. And like, and it's Darwin Cook aping Jack Kirby, but doing like superheroes. And so when I did that piece for my father, I was like, I want to try that 60s style, because I had a much different style back in like 2004 or 5. And, but it was actually probably more influenced by like Libre Mayo. I was doing a lot of like textured stuff. And so I wanted to kind of get away from that and just be like simple and graphic. partially like, my career as a graphic designer, like I like graphic, imagery, and partially like my career as a tattoo artist, like just having to reduce things sometimes down to a simpler form to make a better tattoo out of them. I always kind of like simplification over complication. And so I did that piece for my father, and then I did that piece, that luchador, and I drew him like in the 60s. And then, when I started working on like, when I took those out as a portfolio piece, like people really responded to it. And then when I thought about like what I would do with that, because people like other, editors and stuff were asking me what I was going to do with it, I kind of started thinking about the story I wanted to tell. And I realized that like, if I'm going to tell a Lucha Libre story, it needs to happen in the 60s because, that to me is the heyday of the luchador. Like, El Santo's making like, 5 movies a year. Like those guys are like, it's as popular as they ever were in Mexican culture, was like the 1960s. Not to say that they're not now, but they definitely were like at the heart of Mexican culture in the 60s in Mexico. So I was like, I'll just set it in the 60s and I'll draw it like it's in the 60s too. And that's when I had that idea. So then I started researching guys like Ramita Sr., Jack Kirby, Alex Toth, guys like that. And so, I think, because I love those old cartoons that Alex Toth did the art direction for, like the Herculoids and Space Ghost and, Johnny Quest and like all of those, like I can spend an entire day just looking at character sheets that Alex Toth drew for cartoons. I mean, even stuff like the Galaxy Trio and what was the other one he did? He did some really ones that nobody's heard of, and I love a Toth can work a lot of kind of like Alex Raymond-esque like flat black areas without getting as noodly as Alex Raymond. So yeah, I those are guys that like, I think Toth, Kirby, Ramita, like and again, talking about that Ramita house style, I really wanted it to look like a Marvel comic from like 1964, just kind of like, like I had Joe Ramita over my shoulder telling me how to draw stuff and me trying to do my best Jack Kirby impression. And I think the first couple of issues, at least the first one, I really kind of wanted it to have a little bit of that Fletcher Hanks kind of amateurism to it, like a little more wonky. But then I really real quickly decided, like maybe midway through issue 2, that kind of deliberate naivete wasn't fun to draw, and I don't think it was quite right. So then I kind of, as the issues go on, I get a little more polished with like my anatomy is a little less wonky. Because I was like Ditko too, like Ditko's anatomy was always a little suspect, like people kind of are a little more bendy than they should be. And I was kind of like leaning a little more like on that Ditko era, like Marvel style, where it's there's still a lot of like naivete to it because like the kind of language of Marvel hadn't really been sorted out yet. And then I just kind of put that aside because it was just more fun to just straight up draw like Jack Kirby. So yeah, those were the guys I was really trying to kind of channel. But yeah, it's funny that you pulled that Bermejo out because I had been doing that style before I kind of leaned into this, and then real recently I've kind of been doing a little more textury stuff like Lee will do. But yeah, he's an influence of mine for sure.
So Gonzo, we've talked a lot about the art process and the actual creating of the comic book. But one thing I want to highlight and get you to talk about is the reasoning behind La Mano del Destino and you starting this journey and creating this comic book and putting it out into the universe. You mentioned in the book in a short write-up, you've expressed your unhappiness with the portrayals of Mexican culture and peoples in American pop culture, which seems to either fetishize violence and criminal organizations or are simply infatuated with the food. And if we're sticking to the topic, today's topic of Lucha Libre, American pop culture tends to do a massive injustice to portraying the true essence of luchadors and Lucha Libre. Like, how did you go about addressing these inaccuracies and these misrepresentations specifically?
I think the approach was really, it was one of definitely color palette. Like I was so sick of seeing a sepia tone, dirty brown, piss filter on every time you see Mexico. Especially because like I just know the brilliance and the bright. I mean, like one of the things that I notice most about like Chicano culture is just like how bright it is. And every time you see it in an American movie, it's just so gross looking. So that was like that was step one, was just like get a Chicano color palette in there. And so there was that. And then I really, a lot of it was like, you don't see Mexican heroes. You know what I mean? Like you never see like any Mexican being heroic. Like at best they're like a sidekick, but often they're just like villains, like they're these, the brutal cartels and stuff like that. So I really wanted to showcase a quintessentially Mexican hero, vis-a-vis a luchador. And but then I started really thinking about what it meant to be heroic, like what it means to be a hero or champion someone, to be the champion of people, like to be their champion. And, like that scene you talked about, like with the women in issue 3, like that's one of my favorite scenes, because that's essentially where he wins, right? Like there's the rest of the book happens, but like he's dedicated. He's, he is on a mission, but he's also these people's champion. And like what that means to be their champion isn't necessarily, just being the biggest or strongest. It's about doing the right thing and what the right thing means. And, so him realizing that he has it within him to get what he wants, but he doesn't have it in him to be the person who does that. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't mean he doesn't get to be who he is if he gets what he wants, and he has to make that decision. So, that moment's very important to me. I really wanted to showcase that, like, and it is also kind of like me setting aside a kind of Western white ideal of what it means to be the hero. You know what I mean? Like we have, the idea of the kind of like, ego driven, like the rugged individual getting his way is kind of like, is what the Western, definition of hero can be. And that's not necessarily, doesn't really translate to like, not to my culture anyway. Like it's a little more about like who you can be there for and not what you can do. And that sort of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of like, at its core, I wanted to showcase something that was very much of my culture, that wasn't just a brown washing of some other white thing, because all too often when Marvel or DC or whatever wants to make some like diversity play, it's like, well, we just took this white ass character and made him black now and it's a black story. But it's like, that is not true to the black experience. You know what I mean? Like just because you color swapped him, you did palette swap, doesn't mean that the ethos of the character matches. So I wanted the ethos of the character to be true. And quintessentially like Chicano, Mexican, Latinx, like I wanted that to resonate more than, more than anything. And I think that in having a hero that is quintessentially Mexican, like I get to celebrate the beauty of my culture. And that's something I've talked a lot about on a lot of other places. Forgive me even if this might even be in the back matter, but like, as a minority in America, we have to fight our fight. That's part of being a minority. You got to fight your fight. But we also have an obligation to express our beauty, because fighting our fight will afford us rights. Like eventually we'll get our rights, like, in equality in that status, but expressing our beauty affords us dignity. And that's something that we need, as much as we need our rights, we need our dignity. And that's something we need to exemplify, like what we're fighting for, like this is a thing we're trying to preserve. This is why it's important that we have our rights, because of this beauty that we have that is uniquely ours. And so, I just wanted to express the beauty of my culture, like just the things that I love about it. And it's just silly, dumb things like Lucha Libre. You know what I mean? Like, it is a small hill to want to die on, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to sit there and take who has been presented to me, who I know to be heroes and the, the pinnacle of what heroism can be, of like a technical luchador, and to see Hollywood shit on that in various ways, and so I was just kind of done seeing that, like, this kind of bastardization of a thing that I hold dear. And I was going to carry it with the love of something that I hold dear. And I think that, a lot of what people respond to in the book is the reverence and love that I have for something like Lucha Libre, and so that was my approach to kind of pushing back, was just to, not show how badass we are, or not show how cool we are, and not just to show how beautiful these things are, and I think that that's something that like a lot of people lose sight of. I wasn't afraid to engage in beauty, and not worry about coolness or badassery, because that's being handled other places. I don't need to fucking worry about it.
Damn, Gonzo, you took me to church, man. That was excellently said, and I absolutely agree. The reverence that you have for Lucha Libre is handled with a lot of passion, a lot of love, a lot of dignity, and very respectfully, man. Like I said, it made me want to go look more into it. I kind of went into a short rabbit hole looking up El Santo and, with some of the history of Lucha Libre. And hopefully, that applies to everyone that decides to check it out. Who are some other creators or bodies of work that are fighting the good fight when it comes to positive and accurate representation of Mexican or even like the larger Latinx culture?
In comics, I think there's a guy named Rafael Navarro who does a book called Sonómbulo, which is also about a luchador. I love that book. I love what Rafael does. There's so many people I know. Like, so I do like Latino Comics Expos and like Latino Comic Fest and stuff.
Oh, cool.
And like there's Caden Phoenix is doing a lot for not only female like or Latinx representation, but queer females and like all like Caden Phoenix is doing a lot of really great work. God, I'm gonna miss like there's so many of my friends. I would just say, hey man, go to a Latino Comics Fest like webpage or something. Look at all the exhibitors; those guys are all doing great work. And then I think like kind of
I like that answer. That's a hell of a good umbrella answer. Why not?
Yeah. And then in a broader sense too, I think like Jorge Gutierrez is doing a lot of really good work on TV, like animation wise. Like Maya and the Three was beautiful. God, yeah, I'm trying to think of anyone else who's making like good content, but I mean definitely Jorge Gutierrez is probably like my the most high visible. I mean, yeah, and if you dig Mano or if you dig what I'm talking about, just go on Netflix, watch Maya and the Three. It's everything that I love. It is traditional, but with some modern sensibilities. Like it definitely has like a Mexican ethos to it that is distinctly Mexican too. Like when you watch it, like there are story beats that you just wouldn't see in an American movie, and I it's I think it's like six episodes or something. It's not a big commitment, but yeah, that guy's really he's who I would want to be when I grow up. Is Jorge Gutierrez.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking up Maya and the Three right now, and I'm adding it to my list to watch. This looks rad.
It's great, man. It's brilliant.
All right. Speaking about comic artists that you respect, what is your Mount Rushmore of comic artists? Right, like your top 4. You don't need to have it in any particular order, but like if you had to build a Mount Rushmore of comic artists that mean the most to you, or maybe influence you, or you just really fucking love their work, who would be on that? Who would be on that?
Well, definitely Jack Kirby. Maybe he might be on there twice, but we'll just say Jack Kirby. John Romita Sr. Like I love John Romita Sr. Man. Like I have a power record from like 1977 that I got that has a Romita Spider-Man cover. Yeah, and it's literally I can see it over there. It's like it's framed and on my wall.
The record and the book where you read it simultaneously together. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I collect power records, and so the story. I'm gonna try to do one with Mano at some point. That's a whole other story. So
come on, man, that's badass.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it happen. So Kirby, Romita, Alex Toth for sure. God, I'm trying to think who that fourth person would be. Probably Darwin Cook. That guy was just so clear in his vision, and he wrote and drew everything, and a lot of the work that he did, and his storytelling is just so concise. Like those Parker books are fucking phenomenal. So that would be my Mount Rushmore.
That's a powerful lineup. And then in regards to, kind of thinking about like dream projects and things like that, who would be your dream writer to work with? Like one writer that you would love to do art for, and then an artist that you would like to work with to bring your story to life.
Oh man. God, that's a question I haven't thought about. I don't know about writers. I'm trying to think if there's anyone I would love to work with writer wise. I don't really read comics for writers, and most of the guys I like write and draw their own stuff, and it's part of like what I like about them. I mean, there might be some of those guys I'd love to poach to I mean, I got to have a lot of really good people do pinups in my comic. And then I've talked to some other guys about that. God, that's a good question.
Let's just focus on the artist.
Yeah, let me go artist first. Yeah. So I would love to. I love like Matt Lichnowsky. Like I would love to see him draw some luchador stuff. Yeah,
I had a chance to talk with him. I think last year, and the way that guy's brain works, it's incredible. But to see how his hands actually, take this idea that he's got in his head and bring it to life is amazing.
Yeah, that guy's great. And he's like him, and then I guess also like maybe someone like Michel Fife would be another guy. Like they're two dudes. Like, so I was talking about someone at Heroes, actually. I'm like, I like artist wise, I like guys who I don't know what they're gonna do. Because like right now, if you take I'd say about 90% of artists out there I can be like, Pepe Larraz drawing Daredevil. Like in your head, you kind of know what that looks like, right?
Sense. You're like, that's along his trajectory, right? Like he gets all the big books. Yeah.
Even if, like Pepe Larraz drawing Hellboy, you kind of know what that's going to be, right? Or even a guy like Mignola, if I go, Mignola drawing the Chipmunks, right? Like you kind of know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Like you can extrapolate that in your head. But if I tell you I'm going to have Matt Lesniewski draw Alvin and the Chipmunks, you have no fucking idea what that's going to be. It's going to be weird and it's going to be fucking cool, right? Like, or if I say, I'm going to get Michel Fife to do DuckTales, like that's going to be fucking weird, but it's going to be great, right? So I love those guys who are just like, they're going to surprise me no matter what comes out of their head. Like, it's not going to be anything kind of like, there's no like tick or trick to what they're doing so much that you can kind of like, oh, this guy uses heavy shadows or this guy does a lot of hatching or whatever. Like so many guys can kind of be summed up. I mean, me being such a Kirby acolyte, like if me drawing Cable, you kind of know what that's going to look like, right? Like I'm not putting myself in that kind of, but there are guys like Michel Fife, Matt Lesniewski, guys like Matt Allison too. Like they're just dudes who like, if I ask them to draw anything of mine, I know it's not going to be what's in my head that comes back, but I'm going to fucking dig it. And those are the people, like, that's all I want from, like, if I'm going to write something, an artist is going to do it, I want to be surprised and I want to be anticipating, like when I'm writing a scene, I'm like, oh, I got to see what the fuck this guy's going to do with this. And then just know that it's going to be totally different than what I had in my head, but totally blown away by it. I'd love to work with someone who had like a better sense of like noir storytelling. And I'd love to do like a noir book. Like I was pitching an idea actively with Brian Augustin before he had passed away, and it was very pulpy and very noir, and it was so out of my wheelhouse. It was going to be fucking great. And he unfortunately passed last year. Or maybe someone like like Howard Chaykin, like a guy who just has that kind of like real gritty, pulpy kind of but pulp in the true sense of the word, not just being miserable for miserable sake. Like a guy who definitely could examine the human condition in a way that I don't have my head around. So yeah, I'd say maybe like, Jake can probably be up on that list of guys I would want to like, there's a dude who would write a script. Again, he would write a script that I would be unexpected to me. He would, I'd be like, hey, let's do a story about X, Y, or Z. Like let's do whatever, like our take on Chinatown, and I know what he gives me back is not going to be what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And then I can enjoy myself. So, yeah, that'd be my answer, I guess.
Now I'm really interested in seeing just a run of like childhood cartoons that I grew up on in a very like sick, twisted way by like, Lesniewski and Fife. That would be rad.
Yeah.
I almost skipped over the fact that, La Mano del Destino is getting a volume 2, and that was recently. Yes. The campaign for that was recently accomplished. It was blown out of the water earlier this year. Admittedly, I'd missed out on that campaign, but I only met you in June, so I think I get a little bit of leeway. Yeah. I will definitely be ready if you open it back up. But tell us about Volume 2 of La Mano del Destino. When's it coming out? What's it going to be about?
When's it coming out is a big question. I got to finish the fucking thing, and I'm way behind. So I'm committed to it happening by the end of the year.
TBD.
Yeah, TBD, but definitely by the end of the year because I just need to be done with it. And I've been chipping away. It's an 80-page book, so the kind of so moving forward, with La Mano in the position that we find himself at the end of Volume 1, we're picking right back up in that. It's the same world, it's the same stuff kind of happening to him, but now he is famous, right? He has a name now, so he's not the mysterious luchador who's shown up. He's people know who he is now, and he has a rabid fan base. So, of course, people are trying to exploit that, right? So, Hollywood comes a call in, or the movie industry. Those sorts of, so he's starting to do more things, right? He's starting to create more content that isn't just him in the ring wrestling. In the comic, we see that there's a cartoon about him. That's going to continue. I started making a newspaper strip on Instagram that once I broke my arm, I had to abandon for a while, but I'm coming back to it. But the newspaper strip that I put up is as different from La Mano in the comic book as the Spider-Man comic strip is to Spider-Man in the comic books. It's sort of him, but it's not really him. Because some of the conflict that's going to start happening within the series is going to be him trying to reconcile his image that's being propagated by these other entities from who he really actually is. And so, in the comic strip, he has 2 pet jaguars. And so people are start asking oh, how are your pet jaguars? He's like, I don't have pet jaguars. That's ridiculous. That's the comic strip. That's not me. And so like he starts making movies and people are going to like asking him about things like kind of attributes that he has from the movies and be like, that was just a movie. That's not really me. And so in issue 1 of series 2, it's an 80-page first issue. We're going to do 20 pages of him filming a movie. It's like him on set doing stuff, having conflicts, or he ends up getting kind of pulled into a favor for a studio head, and that ends up kind of unraveling on him. Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's the main conflict of the whole story. And then 20 pages into the issue, he's going to be like, oh, cool, I got to go to my movie premiere. And then we're going to have a 40-page comic book adaptation of a movie that he's made, which is a James Bond-esque spy thriller called Tangier Target. That we see that, and that's just metafiction. That's just him at the movies watching this movie. So we're going to read the whole story. Then it's going to cut back to him in the real world and continue that whole story. So then we're going to do issue 2 is going to come out, which is real world and him dealing with all of those problems. Between issue 2 and 3, we're going to do a sci-fi movie, another movie he made, which is a sci-fi story, which is going to be giant robot versus giant monster. It's Destino bot versus Gamazotes. And then issue 3 will come out. And then between 3 and 4, we're going to do a surf movie. And that's going to be like very kind of Frankie and Annette, like 60s stuff. Then 4 comes out, which is real world. Then between 4 and 5 is going to be the movie that he's been making the entire series, which is the Jungle Adventure movie that he's been making. And then issue 5 will conclude the whole story. So it's going to be kind of almost every other issue is going to be a movie adaptation, but you're going to see in the movies, you're going to see some of the reasons why things are happening in the real world. People are going to like start reacting to, and he's going to constantly be having to reconcile this notion of him with who he actually is. So that's the plan. Issue 1's the only thing that's funded so far is Zoop. I'm going to try to continue to do these through them. I got to get the fucking thing done so that people can see that stuff is happening. But drawing an 80-page comic, one of which is real world and one of which is kind of metafiction, is been challenging, but I'm working on it. But I just want to, I want to delve into other genres that I don't have to shoehorn into my narrative. And he's a movie star, so he can just make movies, right? It's he can be my, Many Lives of Waldo Kitty. I can just do whatever genre I want to take him on. And then it all does serve the narrative of him having to again, it's the idea of identity. Like what happens, what happens to you as a person once you're no longer solely in control of your identity.
This roadmap you've got is fucking bonkers, and I'm here for it. This sounds so fun, man. Like, do you know what it reminds me of? Have you ever read the Radioactive Man comic books from published by Bongo Comics, done by Bill Morrison, the Simpsons character?
I read some of them back in like the 90s.
So the reason I bring that up is because those issues aren't very linear at all. Like there's not a 1, 2, and 3. It's like issue 1, issue 30, issue 50, and every issue takes you through like a different time period, like the Golden Age, Silver Age. So you're kind of following like this pseudo continuity in history of Radioactive Man throughout like these different time periods, and I get that vibe with this roadmap that you're saying, where like you're just using different genre movies as the vehicle to put them in these different situations, time periods, and all that. And I think that is such a fresh approach at like continuity and telling story. Like I'm hype. Like, please hurry up and finish the first.
I'm working on it. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. Are people going to be able to buy, like myself, be able to buy this 80-page giant when it gets done and everything, even with the campaign closed?
I think we're going to try to reopen the campaign because a lot of people have missed out. And then I think there will be some amount of overages where we'll be able to sell them, but it won't be nearly as robust as like my regular issues. We might have to go to reprints, or maybe we'll run a separate campaign for pre-orders or something. Like that's above my pay grade. That's a logistics I don't want to deal with.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Hey, look.
Yeah, I'm going to try to make it. I'm going to try to get it in as many hands as possible. So we'll make it happen.
Dude, I'm going to be on the lookout. I'll sign up for a newsletter or whatever you got. Okay. And as we start getting ready to wrap up, so that way you've got time to go work on this 80-page giant. I don't want to be the reason everyone's like, "Butter," it's because this interview went on so fucking long. He couldn't finish a page a day. One of my favorite questions we ask anyone working in the industry, because we have a lot of folks tuning in that are, aspiring comic creators themselves, and I always want to keep in mind our audience. If you were to give one piece of advice to an aspiring comic creator that's listening right now, based on something you wish you would have known prior or early on in your career that would have made a world of difference or made your life a lot easier, what would that be?
my overall advice to aspiring comic artists is just make comics. Like if you want to, even if you want to work for the big two and you want to like a job drawing Superman or whatever, you need to make indie comics so they can see you can make a comic book. So just make comics before you ever get in making comics for the big two. And if you want to just make indie comics, just make indie comics. So the answer to getting into comics is just make comics. Like there is no way around it. And then the other bit of advice that I try to give people is like, don't wait to be inspired to sit at the artboard to start working. Start working and know that inspiration will come. Yeah, that's a mistake a lot of amateurs make, is like you wait for the idea to come and then you're like, oh, I got to get to my artboard and start drawing. It's easier. Your brain knows, like, once you start making marks on paper, it's like, oh, we're doing this. Like, let's get the ideas generated now. So, start the physical motion of doing art, even if it's just stuff you're going to shit can. Like, just start doing the work and then the ideas will come. Don't wait for the ideas to start doing the work.
Excellent. Those are, I feel like, very straightforward pieces of advice, but probably the only piece of advice someone like really kind of needs, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I have no advice for like style or any of that stuff. Like, I can't be so many comics like are done in styles I don't appreciate, or I'm sure I do stuff that people don't appreciate. Like, there's nothing to be said for like draftsmanship, practice, whatever. Like, try to work toward what you want it to look like. That sort of thing. All of that is is subjective as far as like what'll happen. I mean, make the thing you want to see, and if it doesn't look like what you wanted it to, make it again. Make another thing. Like don't let your inability to stop you from practicing, right? Like you gotta, there's only hours at the table is the only way you get better. So, make a thing. It didn't quite work out. Work on, move on the next thing, like all of that stuff. But the big thing is just like hours at the board. You got to put your time in. There's no shortcut to just hours at the drawing board. So get your hours in, start putting that pencil on paper. It'll only make you better. I heard somewhere that, or this comedian guy I follow is like, you get better at whatever you practice. So if you practice making excuses all the time, you're going to get really good at making excuses all the time. If you practice drawing all the time, you'll get really good at drawing. Like there's no substitute for practice. So if your practice is, coming up with reasons why you can't practice, you're going to get really good at coming up with reasons why you can't practice, So if you have a goal in mind, practice what that goal is, whatever you're going to, and be okay sucking for a while, like I don't, what is it I said the other day? Like, I don't love art because I draw well. I draw well because I love art, because all I do is think about and engage with art. So that engagement is what makes me good at it, not the other way around.
Great advice. Back to back to back. You gave me not one, not two. You gave me like 3, 4 pieces of good advice.
Shit, okay.
Listeners, you can all thank Gonzo, right, by picking up La Mano del Destino, giving him a follow on Instagram and Twitter. I know I'm going to be following. I'm going to make sure I'm following you on Instagram, because I want to go read these comic strips that you said you put on.
Oh, those are a separate account, but I'm going to post about them soon, so don't worry about it. I got you.
Excellent. Gonzo, I'm going to have plenty of links to your channels, to your Twitter, your Instagram, in the show notes, so people can just click on those to give you a follow. And I will highly encourage everyone listening to check those out. Give Gonzo a follow. Gonzo, would you like to plug or announce any upcoming projects or comics, or even just give any parting words to the listeners?
You know what, man? Like, I can't talk about anything. I'm trying to think if I can't talk about anything I'm going to be doing soon. Yeah, you know what? I am doing stuff that's not La Mano soon. I can't talk about any of it. So follow me on social media, and I'm really good about, as soon as I can talk about stuff, I will talk about stuff. So follow me there. And then, I mean, I don't know, but make comic books. If you want to make comic books, make comic books. That's all I got to say. That's my advice.
That's good words to live by. Gonzo, this has been fantastic. Like I said, you have created something epic with this La Mano del Destino. I cannot wait to see him in a surf movie. That is probably the one I'm most hype over. And I wish you best of luck, man. I know that you've got a bunch of conventions coming up. You are a working man's comic creator, and that's what I appreciate about you. Yeah, fantastic interview. Great chatting with you, and I'm so glad I met you at Heroes Con. Best of luck to everything you got going on, brother.
Oh, thank you so much, man. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Well, there you have it, Shortbox Nation. Thank you for hanging out with us. Hopefully it lived up to your expectations and what I said in the intro about it being a great conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, help us spread the word, all right? Share this episode with a friend or someone you know that loves comics as much as we do. And if you're feeling extra generous, feel free to leave us a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. It won't cost you nothing. It takes less than a minute, and it would mean a whole lot to us, all right? It'll really help us get the show growing and in front of more people. So thank you in advance for doing that. The rest of the crew will be joining me next week to record an episode dedicated to the Harley Quinn HBO animated series for another installment of our spin-off podcast series, Pilot's License. If you're unfamiliar with that, that is our spin-off podcast series dedicated to the best comic book animated shows and cartoons. We've been doing it for about 13, 14, 15 episodes, or somewhere around that. I'm going to encourage you to join our Patreon community so you're not missing out on all this bonus content and this extra stuff when we take a week off, right? So if you want more content from us in the meantime, and you don't want to miss a week, head over to our Patreon, find a tier that suits you, and sign up, right? Just know that you're doing good work. You're investing in the short box so we can grow and continue to make more content. Go to patreon.com/theshortbox or just use the link in the show notes to sign up. In the meantime, follow the Short Box on Instagram and Twitter for more comic-related content. And most importantly, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. And please continue to make mine and yours Short Box. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.